Hello, everybody. Welcome. Good evening. And thank you so much for being here. We are so excited that you are able to join us this evening. We appreciate each and every one of you taking the time to be here with us. And I just want to say welcome on behalf of the entire MII team and Kranda, the speaker for today, and all of us here. And this is going to be a wonderful evening, and I look forward to all that God will do. So first, let's start by asking God to be with us. Please join me in prayer as we look to Him. Heavenly Father, we come to you in Jesus' name. We love you, Lord. We thank you and praise you and worship you. We thank you for being our God and our King. Thank you for giving us this privilege to come together as one body in Christ, to learn about all that you have in store for us in this digital and this social media age. I pray that today, as we look at live streaming techniques, and as Jay comes and shares his years of wisdom and all that you've done in his life and given the experience that you've given him, we pray that our eyes of understanding will be open. I pray that right now, anything that raises against this gathering of knowledge will be removed, and we'll all be able to focus and give our 100% attention so that we can use live streaming techniques and all that we're going to learn today for your kingdom, that we can touch lives, serve people, and build your kingdom, Father, in a way that will bring glory to your name. Thank you for Jesus. Thank you for the cross. Thank you for redemption. We love you, Lord Jesus. We ask you to be with us in this time and guide us. We commit everything into your hands, the technology and all that you've given us. In Jesus' awesome name we pray. Amen. Thank you so much. Just a few things before we move to Jay, and Jay starts giving us his wisdom and experience. The first thing is, I want to say this is a unique webinar. Now, some of you listening to me are saying, that's what everybody says, Nachi. Before they start the webinar, they say this is a unique webinar. But hold on, you're going to agree with me in a few minutes as I tell you why this is a unique webinar, okay? So just remember that this is a unique webinar. I'll tell you why. First, I want to run you through MII's vision, Media Impact International. MII is an organization that wants to see more people in unreached areas brought into God's kingdom and growing their faith through the effective utilization of media. What I like about MII is we are focused on media and building God's kingdom through media. So this is MII's vision. And some of you attending this session, you already know about MII. You have been partners, you've been attendees in trainings, you have been connected with MII for a while. This is more for people who don't know us and who will be associated with MII in the days to come. MII's mission is to identify, assess, and come alongside partner ministries like you to strategically increase their media impact. So there are so many things that MII is doing in this area to accomplish this simple vision and mission. And you can visit MII's website, mii.global, and get to know more details about the ministry and how you can be involved and so on. So we've got lots of people jumping in. It's wonderful to see everyone, and messages are also starting to come in. That's fantastic. So there is a resources page in MII Global website, which you can, I highly recommend you check out. There's lots of videos, there's content, there's documents, there's white paper. I'm going to talk about the white paper a little bit more towards the end. So there are lots of resources, and I highly recommend you check it out. Regarding the today's session itself, I just have only one thought and guidance for you, because all of you are Zoom experts right now. All of us have spent so much time in Zoom. We don't need any more instructions, right? So I'm not going to go into any housekeeping. I'm just going to say, if you want to ask your questions, try and use the Q&A section. Q&A, you will see the two chat boxes icon below your screen. Please use that area, because what it does is it helps us to collect all the questions. And also, if you're unable to take your questions now, we will be able to come back to you later. So please use the Q&A section. That's the only thing I want to ask you. Now I come to my point. I told you this is a unique webinar, right? Let me tell you why. How many of you, I mean, I don't have time to ask you to raise your hands and count it, but I can imagine the answer. So many of you have attended webinars, attended training sessions, and have gone back, and after 3 days or 4 days, what happens? Do you remember everything? Or do you remember 30%, 40%? No, because most of us don't. At least I don't, because things get in the way. We have life, we have ministry happening, and then we move on. So what I like about MII's webinar model is this. Why is this a unique webinar? It is unique because this is not just about learning, but it's also about implementing. What do I mean? I mean, today in this 1 hour, 40 minutes of session and Q&A, whatever you are going to learn is also going to be helpful for you to implement by yourself. But we don't want to let you do this by yourself all alone. We want to give you support. So MII has designed this 90-day free support program. So what is going to happen is after today's webinar, you're going to have 90 days to implement whatever Jay is going to teach you, right? And you're going to take all these strategies and you're going to implement. And while you're implementing, you're going to have questions. Trust me, I have done this for 14 years, live streaming. There is going to be questions. You're going to have camera questions, mic questions, all sorts of questions. And guess what? MII will be there to support you. We have a facility that we have put together for the next 90 days where you can ask questions and somebody will handhold you. James himself will answer some of the questions and we will make sure that you are able to implement what you've learned today in the next 90 days. All right. That is why I told you this is a unique webinar. This is unique, right? I don't know many webinars that will give you 90 days of free support. So I'll tell you how you can sign up for that. More details towards the end. So you have to stay through the end, and then I'll tell you how to sign up for that free support program. All right. And now we go to the most important part and the man of the day. There's Jay Kranda, and some of you are looking at him on the live video as well. He's from Saddleback Church. I have the privilege of introducing my friend, Jay Kranda. Is the online pastor of Saddleback Church, and he oversees an online community with tens of thousands of online small groups, home groups, local gatherings around the world. All of us know about Saddleback Church. We know about Pastor Rick Warren and the purpose-driven movement. So he's the man behind the online scene. And he's the co-author of free ebook, State of the Online Church. And he's married to Jody, and they have 2 boys and a girl. And you can learn more about Jay. I'm sure he'll also share more about himself as he goes along. His website is jkranda.com. And so without taking any more time, I want to ask you to put your hands together. I know we can't put our hands, but you have the reaction button in which you can clap the hands. And please help me welcome Jay Kranda, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Nachi. That was a great introduction. And my slide setup is not as fancy as yours. So I'm very impressed. And I want to learn from you. So thank you for that great introduction. I'm very excited to be talking to you this evening about how to effectively stream your services, your church service. If maybe you've never streamed, or maybe this is, maybe you have been streaming and you're just looking at ways to kind of go to the next level. And so we're going to be covering that for beginners, for advanced users, and from all stages, you're going to learn something. And then we're even going to unpack what to measure and how do you actually measure your stream is working. I know if you're a pastor, typically you measure that by how many people are sitting inside your building, or maybe how many people accepted Jesus. And there are ways to do that online. And so I'm very excited to be with you. A couple of things real quick. This is a photo of my family. I do have 3 kids, and I'm actually reminded when I look at my kids, I'm reminded by how much our kind of digital landscape has changed over the years. My oldest son, who's in the back there with the orange jacket, his name's Cash. Yes, his name is Cash. And before he was born, I was actually forced to get on Facebook. My pastor at the time told me, this was about 12 years or so ago, he told me, hey, you need to be on Facebook as a pastor. And I remember when he told me that, I thought it was weird. I was like, I don't want to be on Facebook. I don't even know. I barely knew what Facebook was, but he says, you need to do it. And not too long later, my son was born. And I think about from the time he wasn't here till now, he's almost 10 years old, how much our digital world has changed. We now have everybody's video conferencing. Everybody knows how to stream. And there's so many things going on, and it's moving very quickly. And what I want to encourage you on is thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of this webinar. I know you're overwhelmed, and I know the streaming paradigm can be confusing, because I know I get confused and overwhelmed. And my hope for this webinar that MII has put together is to kind of help you make it easier and kind of unpack it and make it simpler so that you can do it no matter where you're at. Because at the end of the day, you and I are called to be stewards of what God has given us. Some of us have been given more than others. Some of us have been given little, and really, we're not in a position to really, complain over what God has given us. The question is, what are we going to do with it? And I think about the parable of the talents in Matthew 20, about how, one person is given 5 talents, another's given 2, and another is given 1. And the point of that parable is not to focus in on how much each person is given. It's about what you have been given and what did you do with it. And with the digital landscape, with platforms like Facebook and YouTube and all the digital tools that exist, we have to be good stewards with those tools as well. And so we're going to cover some of those topics over the course of the next hour, and then spend time answering your questions. And then, as Nachi said, we even have coaching included with this. So we're not going to cover every single detail, but the amazing thing is there's a landing page set up where you can ask us specific questions, anything to kind of dive deep into it. So let's get into it. It's been a interesting story with the history of the internet. You have 1983, you have the public internet is introduced. This is the internet that we all have come to know. But even before that, the 60s and 70s, there was internet before. It was called the ARPANET. If you've never studied the history of the internet, it was all funded by the government in the US, and it was very university and academic focused. But 1983 is the public internet, very information based. And then the early 2000s, you have kind of a community part of the internet is introduced by platforms like MySpace and Facebook come on the scene, and Twitter, and there's this community element. And I think there's a lot of churches around that time started to go, oh wow, like this is actually something that we could do ministry on here, because we can connect. It isn't just information, but there's connection. And then you have 2020. In 2020, what you have is you actually have a time where you and I got a forced adoption. We all got forced to get on the internet. And what I mean by that is, because of COVID-19 and what that has been doing to our world over the last couple months, everybody needed to get on the internet to connect on some level. And now everybody is, as Nachi was saying, everybody is a pro at Zoom or whatever video conferencing tool you have. When COVID-19 first started, one of the first people I couldn't connect with was my grandma. My grandmother, she's in her early 80s. She's had some medical problems, and we couldn't see her because in the early stages we weren't really sure of the risks with COVID-19. And we got her on a video conferencing tool, and I still remember that moment of, wow, I can't believe my grandma is actually on Zoom. Like, this is amazing. But that was happening all around the world. And what that means for you and I as pastors and leaders of churches is the expectation of the people we're reaching is going up. The digital savviness of our people is going up. And so what that is going to do for us is that puts more pressure on us, that we have to be better at what we do. I think about it, it's what's happened with the iPhone and Samsung phones and Android phones all around the world. Our phones keep getting better every year. I think about if I grab a phone from 5 years ago, it's still a really good phone, but there's more expectation on us that it should be better. It should get better. It's kind of like with bad Wi-Fi. If you ever have bad Wi-Fi or cellular connection, you expect to have high speeds. The same thing's happening in 2020 for all of us. We're all expected to be better. And so this is why a webinar like this exists, to help you make it easier to continue to improve on how you're doing streaming with your church services and make it easy, and then engage in the coaching long term. And so think about the internet, think about your streaming as a front door of your church. That the idea is that this is how you come to meet your people who you're reaching. And really, there are two experiences. There's you're streaming your services and offering an online approach to ministry to your church. Is there's a first contact, meaning it's the first time people get introduced to your church. And so it's the first time you meet people. A lot of people from this point on, the first time that they experience your service or who you are, it's through watching your service on Facebook or YouTube. And so understand, streaming your services and having an online ministry is a first contact. It's also a companion experience. So first contact and companion experience. What I mean by companion experience is that it's something that people will use while they're still attending physically. Maybe they're sick, or maybe they just had their first child, or maybe they're traveling for work and they want to be able to still engage with you. And so having a streaming plan is good for first contact for people and also a companion experience. And what we're going to do is we're going to help you make that first experience, that front door experience to your church, a good experience. It needs to be a good experience because it does represent your church. Everything from the audio quality to the video quality to how do you talk to people. And then in our next webinar that we're going to be hosting, we're going to talk about how to do online small groups well. And so we're not just going to stop at the front door. We're going to help you build out the rest of your house. But I want to encourage you that what you're doing physically in person in your building is not going away, that your online ministry connects to your in-person ministry and they work together. I believe as an online pastor, and I've been one for almost 10 years, that the in-person church is not going anywhere. If the Romans couldn't end the church and the Black Plague couldn't, if world wars couldn't end it, COVID-19 is not going to end the church. Okay, we're still going to be meeting in person, but I believe online can amplify what you're doing in person, and you can reach more people and connect more people by having a strategy that works together. So think of online ministry as a front door to what you're doing. And I do want to lay some groundwork, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I do want to encourage you to think about your strategy, your theology of how you do church. And we all do church differently. Obviously, we have some of the same commandments and the same commissions that, at our church, we think of this as the Great Commandment and the Great Commission have given us 5 purposes of the church. And so everything we do at my church here in Southern California, we think about it through the purpose lens. Your church is going to think through your context, your denomination, your theology. But think through, okay, you know what? If our church, what's important is, we want people to worship, we want people to fellowship, discipleship. How are you going to do that online? And it's important. You don't need to do everything online. You can think of this strategy or this program as an on-ramp that leads to something in person. And so what we do is I want ultimately everybody that experiences our online service, everybody who experiences us from a watcher, I want them ultimately to be a fully devoted follower of Jesus. And I think about, okay, if I can't do this here, how did this lead to in person? And so think through a strategy, think through your theology of what you want to do online and what you don't want to do online. And if you can't do something online, take for example, something like communion. What you would do is that you would actually start a conversation online and encourage them to attend in person. And so think through it and map it and start to actually think about the strategy. And so this is another example of how we've actually spent time. How do you move a watcher to attend in person? And so, for example, we might move them into our church. And so if you live near our church, or if you actually, if you live local, then the idea is that we would actually connect you to those churches. And so it all depends on where you're actually watching at that moment. And so, but start thinking through, and I would encourage you on a whiteboard or on a chalkboard or whatever, think through the strategy. How do I move somebody from watching our service online to actually attending in person? And so this is you could see this watcher kind of move through the funnel. And so it's a both and this is my encouragement to you, is that it's a both and. It's not just online and it isn't just in person. It's a both and strategy, and they work together because God wants to reach people. He also wants people to be engaging in local community, and think of online as a front door that can lead and grow your local church. And so what I want to talk about is kind of for the rest of this webinar is really this idea of how do you actually stream your services? I will say that it is confusing, mainly because the words are confusing. So you have words like YouTube Live, you have words like Facebook Live, you have words like Facebook Premiere, YouTube Premiere. You can actually post things on demand as a post, and then you can cross post. And these are all words about streaming and how to get your content out there. And we're going to cover some of these words. And I want to let you know that it is confusing because the words are always changing and new things are being added. So for example, YouTube Live and Facebook Live, that's how you actually go live. You can stream your service. Facebook Premiere and YouTube Premiere, those are words that you can actually take a video that's pre-recorded and have it go live at a specific time. Cross-posting, that's something that you can like post to different pages, the same video. And so if you think about this, this is why we're all confused because they're always adding new words. But this webinar is here to kind of unpack that and make it simpler. So I want to start with a beginner example. The beginner example, that this is actually a friend of mine who planted a church pre-COVID-19. It was right before the start of actually the whole global pandemic. And it was a small church, under 80 people. They hadn't really met that long. And then all of a sudden he could not meet in person, and he did not have cameras. He didn't have the setup. And what he did the first couple of weeks of the webinar, he actually started streaming from his phone. He just took his phone and he set it up in portrait mode. Landscape is this way, portrait is vertical. And he just went live, and he talked to his community. And it was very powerful because he was planning to meet in person, but he embraced the COVID moment of online only. And he started streaming, and he did some simple things that I think you and I can do. And so if you've never streamed before, or if you're at the beginning stages, I think some of these things will be relevant. Even if you've been streaming for a while, these principles are very relevant to us all. So first off, to stream your service as well, you just need a nice phone. Really, you need a phone that's 2 to 3 years old. What it turns out, these phones that we have are pretty nice, and they have a good camera. They're pretty fast, and if you don't have one of those phones, find somebody in your congregation that has a nice phone. A phone that's 2 to 3 years old, so that you can live stream, because all the phones that have come out the last couple of years have high quality cameras. They process the video well. And so that you can get a really nice phone and you can stream your service, and you can actually just go live right there with some other elements, but it's a very powerful experience. The other thing is you need to have a good cellular strength. And so my encouragement is, wherever you're going to go live. So let's say if you're going to go live in your church building or in your home, test the cellular strength ahead of time. Don't go live the first time by just showing up, and don't test it just on a different location. Actually go there and try to go there at the time of day that you plan on going live. So if you're going to go live at 9 a.m., test that location at 9 a.m. the day before. And that allows you to see how many other people are using the cellular network around that time. And you can see if it's strong or weak. And if it's a weak cellular strength, what you can do is you can actually use the Facebook or YouTube Premiere feature. That's a feature that you can use that can actually allow you to pre-record everything and rely not on the cellular strength, but excuse me, you can actually use the Facebook Premiere if your cellular strength is weak. So make sure you test, is your cellular strength weak or strong? And if it's weak, consider using Facebook or YouTube Premiere feature, which I'm gonna show you a visual on actually how to use that here in a moment. And so next is lighting. Have good lighting. Lighting is really important if you're a beginner or if you're an advanced user. So for example, right now, actually, I'm using a lighting kit. And the lighting, what it does is it actually allows people to feel more connected to you. And what's important is all these things that I'm going to be covering right now, like sound and your video quality and your lighting, your location. If those things aren't done well, it gets in the way of people hearing your message. And so the more seamless these things work, the smoother that they can just watch you and listen to you and kind of receive your words. And so, yes, God can use whatever circumstances to get his message out. But again, we are in the role of being good stewards of what God has given us, and we want to figure out how to make that smoother. So this is why we always do test setups and see, okay, how does that look? How does that sound? And so, for example, lighting, they have something called 3-point lighting. And there are beginner ways to do this and more advanced ways. The beginner way is just to have good lighting to the right of you, and you can use you can buy a lighting kit or you can use natural lighting. It turns out the sun is a really good lighting kit. God did a really good job on the sun. But what you got to make sure is that the lighting's in a good location. So for example, there's different types of lighting. We don't need to worry about this on a great deal, but I just want to let you know there's everything from warm light, which is more yellow light, to a daylight, which is more brighter light. And the warm light tends to be communicate emotions, where it's a little more, it can be for like movies, it could be a little sadder. Bright light does communicate that it's warmer and that it's more exciting and more joyful. And I would encourage you on your setup, try to get a more natural or daylight setting, because that adds to your message. It feels more just happy overall. So for example, don't put the light behind you, because actually your camera, if you're using a phone or if you're using a high quality camera, it only allows so much light in. Actually, the way cameras work is that the nicer the camera, the more the light is allowed in. So the bigger the lens, and you'll see this if you look at old kind of, Android phones or iPhones, the newer the phone gets, the bigger the lens gets, because they're allowing in more light. Our eyes, for example, our eyes are really good because we have two lenses and they're really big. And so that allows in a lot of light. I don't know if you've ever walked into a room and it looks kind of bright, and then you pull up your phone, you take a photo and it's really dark. It's because your eyes allow in more light than your phone. This is why certain animals can see it at night, because their eyes allow in more light. And so, for example, this is why you need a nice phone. This is why you need to make sure you think about your lighting settings. So make sure if you have the window, if you're going to be shooting during the day, and let's say 9 a.m. on Sunday, don't set up the camera where you have the window behind you. Have the window in front of you so the light is hitting your face so people can see you. Another example, this is an example of light above me, and it's warm light. And you can see what's going on is the room looks really just dark and sad. This actually conveys emotion. You probably feel sad for me, but this is not a good setup. This is a mix. We have natural light. I was actually at a coffee shop near my house, and you can see this is light that's coming from outside and above me. And you can see on my face, if you focus in on my face, there's a mix of different types of lighting. And again, this adds to the experience of people watching. So it's something that you do need to think about. How do I make sure that I'm well lit? And then this is a purchase light. So this is actually, I'm using a lighting kit called the Ring, which there are many different lighting kits, which in our coaching section, sessions, we're going to explain some very affordable lighting kits. There's many of them out there. You can actually make your own lighting for, very inexpensively. But for example, I just wanted to show you, I have a light to the right of me that's lighting my face. And then I actually have a backlight that's lighting the back of my head. Again, you don't need a backlight, but what backlight does is it actually gives you a depth. A lot of people don't realize this, that when you don't light the back of your head, it actually makes you feel flat. And by lighting the back of your head, this is what they do in a lot of professional videos. And what it is it's kind of a light that's up high and it kind of looks like the sun, but it adds depth to me. And it separates me from the background, and it provides a lot of context for your eyes. But I wanted to show you the difference between my light, and then if I turn off the purchase light, watch this. So do you notice the difference? You don't want me to talk for the rest of the webinar like this. I'm actually in my garage, so it's dark and it's morning time here in California. It's around 7:30 a.m. But watch. So this is a better light. The other thing is if you have glasses, you have to think about where the light is hitting on your glasses, which Nachi and I have to think about, which is not fun. But a purchased light adds a lot of value. You just experienced that. You imagine me giving the webinar in that setup with no light. No. So something simple like that makes my service better. So good lighting is really important. Next, controlled noise. You have to be thinking about your actual noise level. Noise is really something that can get in between us actually hearing you. So for example, if you're gonna go live at 9 a.m. on Sunday, make sure that you test out the stream prior at that time. Make sure, are you on a busy street? If noise levels are an issue, don't go there at that time. Change your stream time. Be aware of when maybe there's gonna be a big party near where you're gonna be recording. All these things are really important. Something that I have to do is that if I'm gonna be recording something, I make sure my kids play outside or they play in somewhere where they're far away from my microphone, because that can be distracting. And so turning off fans, loud fans can get in the way. So think about your audio levels. And again, test it at that time. So if you're gonna go live at 9 a.m. on Sunday, that's when you're gonna start your stream or record your video. Test it the same time of day, the day before. And so just be aware. Okay, what are the noises? And I would encourage you, actually do a test stream. Do a test stream and see, okay, what am I hearing? And actually put in headphones and listen and go, okay, does this sound good or does this sound bad? And this all gets in the way. And if audio levels are a real issue, then I would highly recommend pre-record everything using Facebook Premiere or YouTube Premiere. And then you could actually do some edits, which we can talk about in our 90-day coaching. Actually, iMovie, which is very standard, or Movie Maker, different type of video editors have ways to remove background noise. So if that's a real problem, there are solutions for this. So think about your noise. And we're going to talk about in the advanced section, a good microphone can do quite a bit to actually increase the volume of actually allowing people to hear you better. And then think about location. So where are you actually going to be streaming? Are you going to be streaming from your church building? Are you going to be streaming from your living room? For example, these are various churches throughout the US that have been streaming. One is, here's an example inside a building. Here's another example inside a living room. And actually, my pastor at my church, we've been streaming outside, which is, again, if you stream outside, it's a lot harder because you need to be thinking about volume. You need to bring gear. It's not super easy. It's something, actually, the first couple of weeks we streamed inside his house. And then we slowly, as we got comfortable with it, we went outside. But you think about the context and the setup of where you're going to be streaming, and depending on the gear. I really love the visual of streaming in a living room, because it actually shows that you're streaming into their context. So they're probably watching in their house with their family, and showing this visual is a very powerful way to kind of show that you're with them. But again, if you're shooting in your living room, you need to think about, okay, how am I going to do this? What's the volume level? Can my kids be quiet for that long? These are all things you have to think through as you're planning out your live stream. So location is very important. Your building might be easier because you have gear there and nobody else lives there, so that you can just kind of set up. But think about your volume level. Think about how thick your walls are and the noise level. Test it out the day before so that you can actually see, is this a good setup? And then think about your service flow. What does it actually look like from start to end? So for example, with our online service, when we stream our church service, what we do is we start with a welcome. And we actually talk to those watching. We'll say, hey, thanks for joining us online this week at our church. My name is Jay. I'm the online pastor. I would love to talk to you and help you engage in our church. Hey, say hi in the chat. And we'll do stuff like that on the front end to kind of engage people so that they know that they're welcome, and we're acknowledging those online. And then we'll have a song. We'll have somebody, sing a song. And I want to encourage you, if you're a pastor or a preacher, make sure that you have people engaging, not just in listening to your teaching, but also worshiping through music. That adds a lot to your service flow. So that can be a little harder, because you need to figure out, okay, how do I actually have somebody preaching and teaching and also a song? So for example, your church building is probably the easiest way to do this, or wherever you worship regularly, because you just invite them over. And then the idea is that you have a stage set up, and you interject in between. People share the stage together. And then for us, we'll go to preaching, which is normally 20 to 30 minutes long. And then we go to another song, and then we close. And then at the close, we talk to those online again. We say, hey, thanks for watching online this week. We would encourage you to take a next step and actually get engaged into our church. And we talk about next steps because we want people to not just watch our content, but actually be included in our community. And so by joining one of our Bible studies, or by us praying for them. And so talking about this is thinking through your service flow. And again, it's going to look different. My church, we have our own service flow. Your church is going to have different, but make sure you think through how to provide a robust kind of church service that's beyond just you preaching and teaching. And maybe your first one is just preaching and teaching through a Facebook Live, but your second one should be more. It should be something more than just you preaching and teaching. It should be a full church service. So start thinking through that. I want to highlight the differences between a TV show and a YouTube show, because this is really important. A TV show is actually something that is broadcast. It's professional. There's usually no engagement, meaning they pre-record it and then it just happens. And then it's usually a one-time stream. Normally, stuff created for satellite and network shows, they record it and then it's done. But with a YouTube show, things produced for the internet, it's a very different format. It's going to be interactive, it's going to be semi-professional, and it's going to be ongoing engagement. And I think this is the point I really want to encourage you on, is that when you do things for the internet, that it's not something that's done once you stream, it's over. So once you end streaming your service on Sunday, it's over. You need to understand that people are going to watch that for days, weeks later. And you need to go back like later that day on Sunday and Monday, and you need to actually talk to those people, and you need to actually engage those people. And so, for example, like Sunday night, after you're done streaming, go back on the stream and actually reply to people, engage them, see it as something that's ongoing. Any YouTube show now, what they do is that they'll say things like this. They'll say, hey, the best comment we're going to pin to the top, or I'm going to be answering your questions later today in the comment thread, because they see it as a piece of content that lives on. It's not just about a one-time thing, it's ongoing. And this is the major shift that's happened between things produced for TV and things produced for the internet. It's ongoing. So see your service that you produce as ongoing. Don't just record it and never return back to it. Return back to it a couple times that week and like things and respond to people and engage people. And then think through next steps. Next steps are super important in how you talk to your online community. So maybe when you preach in a worship in your worship building, what you can do two things. You can actually talk to people afterwards. And so if people are preaching, after you're done preaching and teaching, you can, if you saw somebody that maybe prayed a prayer, you can go grab them afterwards and actually have a conversation before they leave. Or maybe you have cards in your worship building or your setting where people fill out things. But when they're online, you can't do that. You can't just go grab somebody, and you can't have them go fill out a card. So how do you do this online? Well, you do this by encouraging people to actually fill out a card online or text you. And so in our context, we actually have them text us or email us. And the way people text or respond is going to be dependent on who you're trying to reach. Because, for example, you might have a preferred way of communication, but maybe your kids have another preferred way of communication. And so you kind of lean into whatever is the primary way your audience wants to engage. So for example, my audience is primarily in the US, is primarily probably in their late 30s, early 40s. And so email and texting is our preferred platforms. And so on the service, on our welcome and on our closing, when I talk, I actually say, hey, if you want to get engaged in our community, text us at 5500 this, and I'll get engaged with you, or email us at online@saddleback.com. And so I provide very simple next steps for my audience. And I will say something that you do need to kind of think through is how people are watching. Because I think this is another shift that we've all experienced that has been a little harder for us to understand. But people do watch your content online. You'll reach more people. The problem is that people will leave more frequently, and people are watching in different settings. So for example, if somebody's watching inside your building or with you in person, let's say if you have 30 people inside your building, the likelihood is all 30 of those people are going to watch till the end, and they're not going to leave the building. But online, you might be able to reach 300 people watching, but maybe only 30 people are going to watch to the end, because people tend to leave more frequently online. And there's a couple reasons for that. It's because of Facebook and just YouTube. You can reach a lot of people. The other reason is when people watch your service, they're online on Facebook Live or YouTube Live, they're going to be watching either in the feed, meaning they're going to be scrolling and checking out, or they're going to be watching in full screen. And so in full screen, what's important to understand is when people are done watching your service, they're just going to close the window, or they're going to close the app. And so what that means for you is that you need to understand is that they're not going to click on your post. They're probably not going to minimize and actually watch, kind of do that step. They're going to be on full screen, and then they're going to leave. I don't know if you've ever watched a video maybe on your laptop, and as you're watching it, you actually just close out the window. This is what they're doing. So this is why it's really important for you to talk to those watching full screen. And I would encourage you, use a text number, use something that people can use very simply, and think through what's the easiest way for my people to actually respond. And if you don't know that, I would do a very quick survey with your people. Ask people in your congregation, hey, what's the primary way do you want to take a next step? Would you rather text us on a WhatsApp number? Would you rather message us on YouTube or Facebook? Or would you rather email us? And have conversations with your people and find out what's the best platform. And then use that in your service, so that when you pray a prayer of faith at the end of your service, instead of having them email you, have them text you. And so actually while you're preaching, say, hey, if you just prayed that prayer, text us at this number. And trust me, if you start talking about it that way, more people will actually take next steps. But think through, how do people take next steps, and what are the best platforms? On our actually online page, we do a couple things, and you'll see below the video, we actually highlight this. So if you're watching, there's two very easy ways, and we make this the default experience. And so you can either fill out a connection card, which is just a form that goes to email, or you can text us. And you can see we've dedicated a lot of space. Now, I know a lot of people are just watching full screen, but I do both. I spend time on our page making next steps very simple, because ultimately I want people, every viewer, to take a next step. So I'm going to spend a lot of time to make this simple and easy for people to do. So think through, how are people going to take next steps, and pick an easy platform and make it very simple. And then next, go live at a specific time. Go live at a specific time. And I'm going to encourage you, go live at the time your church normally meets. So if your church meets 9 a.m. on Sunday, or let's say 11 a.m. on Sunday, go live on Facebook and YouTube at that time. So you would have your phone set up, you would have, you have good cellular strength, you have good lighting, your noise levels because you've tested all this the day before. You're inside your church building, or maybe in a living room. Your service flow. So if you have somebody who's going to lead you in worship, they're right next to you, ready to go. You know how you're going to get your next steps, and then you're going to go live right at 9 a.m. And the idea is that plan that out. And so people want to go to church when they're typically used to going to church with you. And then you would tell your people ahead of time, by the way, we're going to go live at 9 a.m. at this time, but go live at the specific time. But if for whatever reason live doesn't work, either your cellular strength doesn't work, or maybe it's your phone can't do it, you can pre-record everything. So you would actually pre-record it with a camera on your phone or an external camera, and you would use Facebook, YouTube Premiere. These are really great platforms that you can use. So what Facebook and YouTube Premiere are is that you can actually upload your service. And again, you're going to have to pre-record it. You can edit it if you want, depending on your setup. Is you would upload it and you can schedule it to go live at 9 a.m., for example. So you would upload it, and you would need to upload it a couple hours ahead of time, or even you can do it a day or days before if you've already preached and prep and you have everything ready. And then what it does is that at 9 a.m., it will actually go live and it will premiere the video. And these are examples. So to the left, this is Facebook. You can see it actually says it's premiering, and it will tell you how many people are watching at that time. People can chat like it's a live video. Again, you can do all this. If you have bad cellular strength, use Facebook Premiere, and it can actually be treated like it's live. And then on the right is an example of YouTube Premiere. What's great about YouTube Premiere is that if you schedule it ahead of time, people can actually set up a notification so they can actually get notified when you go live, and a chat window will pop up when it goes live. These are great examples of a great tool. If you don't have good cellular strength, use Facebook and YouTube Premiere, because you get to live stream the video, you get to have live chat, and then the cool thing is that you, as the pastor, can actually enter the chat while you're talking, because everything's pre-recorded. So you can actually engage real time and answer people's questions. And so when you upload the video, what happens is these are examples of Facebook and YouTube. When you upload it, there's a button you check called Premiere. And so when you actually go to upload it, you check that button Premiere, and then you schedule it. And you can schedule it, I think, up to 7 days in advance. And so if you're really on top of your game, you can actually record it way in advance. Or if you feel like you're about to get sick, record it in advance and then upload it, and then schedule it and hit that Premiere button. And then it would premiere at that specific time. And so it's a really amazing thing that you can use, is that if you want to pre-record everything, and if cellular strength's an issue, use Facebook Premiere and YouTube Premiere. It's a really an amazing tool that's free. It's free for us all. So make sure you check that out. Let's now spend the remaining amount of time talking about Advance. Advance is the advanced options, I think, and I want to talk real quick to those beginner users. You're going to start as a beginner, but my encouragement is continue to improve how you stream your service or how you do your online service online. Just improve 1% every week. So even some of these advanced tips, you might go, I'm never going to be able to do that. Well, I'm not saying you're going to have to do all this, but just take some of these tips and apply it to your beginner steps. And trust me, as you do something slowly, it's kind of like building muscle. If you know anything about how God designed us, in order to get stronger, you have to break down the muscle for it to be rebuilt. The muscle doesn't get built on top of each other. You actually have to break it down to build it up stronger. The same thing's true with your online service. Sometimes you need to break it down to kind of get a little stronger. I'm actually a runner. I run about 10, 15 miles every week. And when I first started running, I could not run at all. I was terrible. I was out of breath. I was weak. I was sweating so much. And now 3-4 years later, I'm able to run a lot with very little, output. And the reason is because it was a slow commitment. I just slowly started building up. And so you might feel overwhelmed at this moment, but I want to let you know is you start at the beginning stages, and as you kind of build up your muscle of streaming, of production, you'll get stronger, and this will become easier for you over time. It's a slow journey, but just commit to get 1% better. So let's talk about Advance. First off, the first step is get a higher quality camera. Get a higher quality camera. This will add a ton to your production quality. I'm actually using a Canon camera right now. If many of you may not know this, but you're actually able to use an external camera as your webcam. And so now remember, I didn't start here. I actually started with just using the webcam inside my computer. And then there's things you can buy like USB cameras. This is an example right here. I have one. I happen to have one. This is called a Logitech camera. It's a 1080 camera. And what you'll notice on when the cameras get bigger and better, the lens gets bigger. And I want you to start to notice that. When you see nice cameras, you'll see the lens is bigger because it's allowing in more light, which makes you look better. But use a better quality camera and figure out how to get that into your setup for live streaming. And so what you'll need to do this is you'll need something called a USB capture HDMI converter. And they sell these things. There's everything from very cheap. You can buy them for like 30 bucks. They go up to 120 bucks. And in our coaching, we'll kind of answer very specific questions on what are the best options for you. But what this does is really nice cameras, from everything from a basic camcorder camera to a digital camera. What they have is they have an HDMI out. On the side of the camera, if you open up some of the side panels, they have an HDMI or mini HDMI input. And what this does, this allows you to convert that HDMI signal into a USB signal. And it allows you to take that USB and plug it right into your computer. And so that's what I've done. I actually have this capture card right here, and it allows me to take the output of this camera signal and put it into my computer. And you can see this camera is nice. Again, it's making me look better than I actually am. And this does a lot. So I think the first thing, if you want to advance your streaming, you got to get a higher quality camera. So if you don't have one, figure out if somebody in your church community has one, and figure out if you can use it. And there's some software that you need. So one of the software pieces is OBS. So I want you to write that down or take a note. OBS. OBS is a free software that actually allows you to bring in your camera and output to Facebook and YouTube. So the thing with your phone, and you might not think about this, but with your phone, it's doing a lot. It's actually it's your camera, it's your processor. There's this thing called an encoder, which you don't need to worry about. But encoders are the things that take all the information and data and make it small and push it out to the internet to make it really nice quality. Because of the size of the file. Well, when you stream from your computer and you're actually using an external camera, you have to find something else to encode your data. OBS is that tool. It's a free tool that will actually allow you to do a couple things. It will allow you to use an external camera. It will also allow you to do multiple views. So if you want to have 2 camera views, you can actually have 2 camera setups. And what you do is the OBS tool actually is the producer. It allows you to switch. And you can actually have somebody point to one camera here, another camera here. You can even do overlays. You can have graphic overlays on your screen, kind of like Nachi did at the intro, where he was mixing in different views. You can do this with OBS. And so OBS is a free tool. They actually have another tool called Wirecast, which does cost money. I actually use Wirecast most of the time. It costs a couple $100. So OBS and Wirecast are very similar. I know thousands of churches that use OBS here in the United States and love it. But Wirecast is another tool. But make sure to up your game, you need to get a nice quality camera, and you need to figure out how to get that camera into your live streaming setup. And you're going to need a USB capture converter, and then start to learn OBS. And one of the greatest tools that I want to let you in on, you probably already know this, is YouTube University. YouTube is amazing. I learned Wirecast and OBS by just going to YouTube, and you can actually type into YouTube OBS tutorial, and there are hundreds of free trainings on how to learn it. Or if you have somebody in your congregation, maybe there's somebody younger that you want to run OBS for you, send them that video to go learn it. But we'll answer more questions in the Q&A on this and also in our coaching, but you need a higher quality camera. There's some other tools like Restream, BeLive, StreamYard. All these tools are different ways to do streaming where maybe you don't want to use OBS. And these are kind of web-based tools that you can use. I've used all of them on different levels. Some of these are beginner and some of these are very advanced, but if you don't feel comfortable with OBS, try out some of these tools here, like Restream or Yellow Duck TV actually allows you to stream to Instagram if you wanted to. Again, those are advanced options, but there's many different options out there. These are just a few. And then if you're gonna be live streaming at a high quality, don't use cellular or prepaid. Figure out how to do Ethernet, meaning try to get a hard connection. So figure out if you have a router near you, or if you have a provider, figure out how do you get a hard line. Anybody that's doing high quality streaming at this level, they're not doing a Wi-Fi or prepaid or cellular. They're doing a hard line connection. For example, actually, I'm streaming in my my garage, like I said, and I bought online. I bought a 40-foot Ethernet cable, and I ran a direct connection to my router because I didn't want to rely off of Wi-Fi for this, because Wi-Fi and kind of that type of connection is a little less. And so if you're going to be doing live streaming of this quality, do a hardline connection, meaning Ethernet. Figure out how to hardline into your computer so that you can actually have good quality. This is really important. I've unfortunately streamed from my computer using Wi-Fi, and you'll have gaps. So if you want good quality, figure out how to do a hardline connection. And then good lighting. I would invest in multiple points lighting. And I would write down 3-point lighting. And there's a bunch of YouTube videos that will teach you how to light your face well. And I want you to start to notice on YouTube videos and on movies, you'll see lighting does a ton to increase the production level. And so having a good lighting kit is super helpful. And there's tons of ways to do this. We'll talk about in the coaching different options that you can do. But again, I use the ring light, which there are more affordable options, but I have 2 points of light. I have one to the right of me that's lighting the side of my face, and then I have the back light. So good lighting is really important. Controlled noise, still very relevant. And I would recommend getting a USB microphone, or figure out how to use your existing audio setup at your church to go into OBS. And you can. So if you have a mixer, or if you have any type of audio setup at your church, you can bring that in to your live stream. I do think it's important to kind of note that your online stream audio levels and your in-person audio levels, they typically talk about this, how they mix it, are going to be different. So sometimes when you mix things for in-person, it's going to sound different. So if you have speakers, let's say inside your worship building or wherever you watch, you go to church, it's going to sound different online. So you need to make sure you listen to it. So if you want a high quality, advanced streaming experience, make sure that wherever you're streaming to, listen to it. This is why you need to test. So I would recommend do a test stream. There's actually this really cool feature you might not know about, but you can actually go live on your own Facebook account, your profile. You can actually make it private. So actually when you go live, there's a little setting that says public or private. And you could actually test out a stream ahead of time so that only you can see it. So nobody else in your feed will see it. And that allows you to test it. So put on headphones and actually listen to it. Okay, can I hear the street outside? Or if somebody's in the back making noise, can I hear it? Or does it even sound good? And so think about the controlled noise. And a good microphone, this is called a Yeti microphone. Again, you don't need this. You can use all sorts of types of microphone. A good microphone will actually tune out the exterior noise and actually make you sound better. The other thing is with a good microphone is this is a podcast microphone. So actually I have to be closer for it to sound better. And so that's something. So if I'm moving around, it's going to sound different. And you got to be thinking about that. So think about your audio levels. Think about the type of equipment you need and how do you get it into the system. So OBS, for example, that tool is going to be that system that actually allows you to bring in the different audio inputs. If you have multiple people, maybe you have somebody singing and you want them on a different mic. OBS is that tool that can kind of mix that all together and make sure you test it out, have a test service to make sure, does it work? And how does this all work together? And then location, again, make sure that if you're in your worship building, test this all out ahead of time. Location is very important. Maybe if you're doing a more advanced setup, you're going to have different camera angles, and people can sit at different places, and whoever's running your OBS, they can actually point to different places. This is all the stuff you need to be thinking through if you want your experience to continue to get better. And then your itinerary, how does actually the whole service work? So for example, what's really powerful is if you're gonna use a tool like OBS and actually stream things stream things through that tool, you could pre-produce something. You can actually record a worship song that's at a different location, and OBS will allow you to bring in a video. So you can actually go live, and then you can say, hey, we're gonna do this song, and maybe somebody recorded a worship song on site somewhere outside, or maybe at a different location, or maybe in someone's living room, and you can actually go and play the video throughout your live stream. Again, OBS does a lot of amazing things, but I would encourage you, if you're trying to do a more robust experience, have more songs, allow it to feel more like a normal worship service that your church would put on. Think about how to do that, but think through your itinerary, and then get better at next steps. And I think the big thing that I want to encourage you, if you're going to use OBS and if you want to be more advanced, think through how to add overlays. You can actually have graphical overlays on your service. And so these are things you would actually set up in OBS. Something we do at the end of our service, when our service ends, we actually have a graphic that we hold for 3 to 5 minutes. So instead of just ending our service, we actually hold a graphic of our next steps where we have our text numbers up there. And we hold that for 3 to 5 minutes after the service ends on Facebook and YouTube, because we know people don't necessarily hear us and immediately act on that. We have the graphic there where people can actually text that number and take a moment and write it down. So maybe in OBS, what you do on the last moment, what you do is you have a graphic with some music, and you point to that. And what you do is you can actually hold that for 3 to 5 minutes at the end. Again, if you're a beginner, you go, wow, this is really advanced. I want to let you know, if you're at the beginning stages of this, you don't need to do that right away, but maybe you can work towards that over the next month. But that's a great thing that a tool like OBS or Wirecast or Restream or YellowDuck.tv allow you to do. So this is why you start to invest in some of these technologies, is because you want to have a better experience, a more advanced experience. So start to think through that. And then what you can do optionally is you can use a Facebook Premiere or YouTube Premiere. And one thing I wanted to tell you, if live streaming is difficult for you, if you're like, you know what, I don't know if I can get the right cellular strength, one thing you can always do is you can use all these principles and pre-produce your whole service. Now, understand, if you pre-produce it and you use a Facebook Premiere or YouTube Premiere, which again will treat it like it's live, and you can have chat and you can schedule it at a specific time, you're going to need to edit it. Now, editing takes a lot of time. And so maybe you have somebody in your church that is a really good editor that knows how to use iMovie or Final Cut Pro or Adobe Premiere or one of these tools. Understand that if you want to pre-produce it, you can, and somebody can record it with a nice camera, and you can think about all this through editing, but it's going to take time. So for example, if you wanted to go live at 9 a.m. on Sunday, then somebody's going to have to start editing it on Friday, on Saturday, because it's going to take a little bit of time. And that means you need to record your message and all the music on a Thursday or Friday. So pre-recording things is a great option too, but it's going to add to your process. So if somebody knows how to edit, you can edit it all together. You can have the itinerary. And then what you do is that you just schedule it to go live at the time. So live streaming through OBS is a great option, and think through all these things, or you can pre-produce everything and edit it. But it depends. Everything takes a little bit of technical skill, but depending on who you have in your church to help you out, I would start with live streaming. And then if you want to pre-produce everything, you kind of go that route as well. But again, start at the beginning stages, and then you can start to improve. Use some of these principles. So if you're at the beginning stages, think through, okay, how can I get a better mic in my setup? Okay, and then start to learn OBS and start to learn some of these tools. This is actually the church that I was referencing that started. So pre-COVID, they had never streamed. The first couple of weeks, they started to use just their camera. And then you can notice on this setup that they have a nicer camera, and you can see that it's way better than just having yourself in the feed. You can see that you can see that they have a nice quality camera. They have a nice lighting kit. They've started to think through this. He did not do this week 1 or week 2. He slowly started to improve his setup. He got more comfortable with it. And now his setup is a very nice quality. Actually, I think for one of these was live and the other was using Facebook Premiere. But you can see that this adds to the experience, which allows those watching your service to hear you better. So think through that. There's another tool I do want to highlight called the Church Online platform. I don't know if you've heard this, but this is a free tool that a church called Life Church built along with other churches that you can use as a resource to actually host your online services. You can either live stream there or you can actually pre-record. But what it does is it gives you a website for you to stream to with chat, and you can have a bunch of links to your church service. So instead of just streaming on Facebook and YouTube, you can actually have your own website that's linked to your church's website. This is completely free. And I would highly encourage you, if you're beginner or advanced, go to the Church Online platform and sign up for this. This is an amazing tool. They have a bunch of training videos on how to use it. I've used it. Over 10,000 churches use this tool. It's an amazing tool. Go to Church Online platform. You can sign up for it today. The one thing I wanted to say before we kind of end on some how to measure this, I wanted to highlight a specific role called a digital greeter. And I think this is really important. When you're streaming your service either live or using Facebook or YouTube Premiere, you need to have somebody in the chat talking to people. If you use Premiere, that could be you as the pastor, the preacher. If you're talking live, it needs to be someone else. But what they're doing is they are welcoming and engaging those people on the chat, actually in the Facebook chat or in the YouTube chat or on your Church Online platform. What they're going to do is they're going to welcome people. Hey, thanks for joining us. Hey, I see you. I see you, Nachi. I see you, Jay. And they're calling out people and letting them know that you see them. They're also going to post links to different things throughout the service. So maybe you have links to maybe a verse, or maybe you actually have notes. They can share those. They're going to ask questions like, where you're watching from. Like right now, like for example, somebody in the chat, in the Zoom chat, can be talking to people, hey, and get people to engage and talk about their day, which adds to a more engaging service. They're going to share different information points, like maybe the song you sung, maybe there's a link to a YouTube video to whoever originally performed it. And so that, again, it's kind of like it's a companion to the service. They're going to answer questions. If somebody, as you're talking, you're not going to be able to answer questions. Like, for example, I can't answer your questions while I'm talking because I don't have chat up, but they can go, hey, what was that verse that pastor put, or he talked about this. They're the ones engaging people. And then they can share next steps. So for example, if you have a WhatsApp number, as you talk about it, they're actually going to put that number in the chat so that people can engage. And then they're going to say bye to people. But having, if you can't do it, I would encourage somebody in your church community to do this. Be a digital greeter and have them scheduled at that time. So every Sunday at 9 a.m., they join in on the chat and they actually engage people as a digital greeter, and they engage people. This role makes it feel more engaging and more intimate, and it makes it a better experience. This is a really important role to kind of think through. So the one thing I wanted to kind of end on is what to measure. And I think this is very important to think through. How do we know this is actually working? How do we actually know that everything's working online? And we do want to measure things. And there's some very simple ways to do this. So first measurement is on Facebook. They have a number called Facebook reach and YouTube impressions. And you can get this data point very simply. And I want you to think about Facebook reach and YouTube impressions as how many people drove by your church service. So maybe drove by the street. You would never think about how many people drive by your building as attending your church service, okay? Now, it does tell you how many people you can reach, but this is an important number to know how many people you can influence, but it doesn't mean how many people attended your church. So when you see this number, Facebook reach or YouTube impressions, think about it as how many people drove by your church service. There's another thing called Facebook views and YouTube views. Think about this. This is how many people drove by your building and actually looked inside your building. And so they paused and they looked in. Doesn't mean they attended your church service, but it does mean that they stopped and checked you out, that there was something interesting about what you were doing. And so this is data you can get very simply. So on on Facebook, what you do is that you actually go to, and one note, you have to have a Facebook page. So if you're streaming to your own profile, like your own Facebook account, you have to stop doing that. You need to create a page for your church so that you can get this data. This data is not accessible if you don't have a page. So this is one of the benefits of having a page. And so on the page, what you'll do is you'll go to Insights. You go to Insights, and then you go to Creative Studio, and then they have all this data. And they'll give you a ton of data on your actual church service. And I would encourage you, look at every week, how many people watched you 3 seconds or more, because that actually shows people not just watched you 1 second, but it's a little bit of an engagement. And look at this. And once the first couple of weeks streaming, I would encourage you spend 5 to 10 minutes every week looking at this data, even if you don't know what it means, but just consistently look at the data. So the idea is typically when you do your church service Sunday night, you might take a nap or you're done because you're tired. Here online, I'm going to encourage you, don't immediately take the nap or kind of log off for the day. Go on and look at your data and get some feedback. Okay, so we streamed this and this is how many people watch, and look at this data. And I would encourage you, look at the 3-second video views on Facebook. And on YouTube, this is the example on YouTube. If you go into YouTube, you go to Creative Studios, you click on Analytics, they'll give you all this data. So for example, impressions. Again, that's how many people drove by your church service. And then you can look at views. This is how many people stopped. That doesn't mean they watched your full service, but that tells you how many people actually thought your content was interesting. And then there's this other piece of data that Facebook and YouTube will give, which is retention data. How many people actually watched your full service? So for example, this is the retention data. So for example, on Facebook, and I want to let you in on a little secret, only 1% of the people watching on Facebook are actually going to complete your service. That's because Facebook is a digital marketplace. They've kind of digitized our community. And so very few are going to complete it. And so don't be discouraged if you're like, why are only 1% watching our full service? It's because you're reaching more people. But understand, this is helpful to know, okay, how many people go from review to actually completing? On YouTube, on average, you're probably going to have retention around 30%. You're going to reach less people, but you're going to have more retention. And mainly this is because people go to Facebook to kind of waste time. You kind of go to Facebook just to scroll, but you go to YouTube to watch things. So the people on YouTube are more direct. One thing I will say is that there's this little button here, and this confuses me too. So Facebook and YouTube are always adding things, but they have this button that if you check this button, it will only include people watching 15 seconds or more. And this means that your graph will get better, your retention will get better. But this is important. I would encourage you, if you're I would keep that unchecked just so you can know, maybe check it and check it out. But on both platforms, on Facebook and YouTube, spend a couple moments on Sunday afternoon looking at the data, depending on how you're streaming. For example, if you're just starting off, just look at Facebook, because if you're just streaming from your phone, you're just going to be able to do Facebook. If you want to stream to both platforms, a tool like OBS allows you to do both at the same time. And so you might look at both, but look at this data regularly. And so what you're going to see is you're going to start to build a dashboard. Okay, so this is how many people I reached. This is how many people viewed it. This is how many people watched 10 minutes. And then how many people actually took a next step. And I want you to actually document, okay, how many people messaged us on WhatsApp? Okay, we had 8 people. Great. And what you're going to do is you're going to start to map this out on a funnel and on a dashboard. And you're going to see your retention. Okay, great. We had 1,000 people view us. We had 100 people view us, and we had 8 people take a next step. And if you start to think through this and look at this weekly, you start to see a kind of trends. And actually what I do is I put all this data on a Google Sheet, not very fancy. It's just free Google Sheets. And I put my week, my message, and I put all this data out. And so that I can start to see trends. So maybe one week we doubled our next steps. And what that means is that I look and I go, what did I do different that week? Why did double the amount of people actually text us that week or message us? And I tried to see, can I make that regular? So maybe a screen overlay that I used OBS on, or maybe when I was streaming from my phone and I said, hey, right now, message us here. Maybe that increased engagement. You only see those trends if you're regularly documenting it. And I regularly look back on the previous weeks on my Google Sheet and I see, What were our high points? So why did I have 30% more people view us that week compared to this week? What was different? Maybe it was a holiday. Maybe something happened. Like, for example, when COVID-19 happened, the first couple of weeks, we had triple the amount of engagement. And then 2 months into it, our engagement went down. Well, it's because of COVID-19. And so if you need to start looking at your data, and you need to document it, and then you can start to notice trends, and you can start to correlate different things. Why did this week work, this week not? We'll spend more time in our kind of our coaching sessions to kind of explain and answer specific questions. But I would start to look at, I would look at 3-second views on Facebook and views on YouTube. And then I would look at retention, how many people watch 10 minutes. And again, you can get all this data in Facebook Insights and in YouTube analytics, and then look at next steps. And then the last couple things, and we'll spend a ton of time in our next webinar. We're gonna dive deep into this, but the idea is that you wanna think more than just streaming your services in your front door. You wanna build out the rest of your actual church building, which our next webinar is gonna focus in on how to do online small groups, but a couple things to build a lasting community. One is have like a Facebook group or a community space where people can connect during the week. Again, that's going to be determined on how your community works. It might be a WhatsApp group. It might be a Facebook group. Use a platform that makes sense for your church community. I use a Facebook group because that's where my community meets. So for example, we stream on Sunday on our Facebook page and on our YouTube account. And during the week, our space where we connect is Facebook, our Facebook group. And this is where I can interact. Our community can interact with each other. What I love about this is that I can actually go live just from my own account into our Facebook account, and then people can kind of see me and know me, and I can be a little bit less professional. For example, I'll stream with my kids sometimes, and then people can kind of interact with each other and post prayer requests, have a space for people to interact during the week. And so if it's a Facebook group or a WhatsApp group, use the platform that makes sense for you. And then the other thing, think about having some kind of a video or course that you can send people. So if people text you and took a next step, like they prayed a prayer of faith, or they want to learn more about your church, instead of having to jump on a video call and talk to them about something, maybe you can send them a link. And so what we've done is we actually have a class called Class 101, where we recorded a video where we actually talk to them everything they need to know about our online community. So instead of jumping on a video call, they can just go and watch this video. And I shot it like I was having coffee with them. So the idea is that whatever I would say to somebody that was new to our church over a cup of coffee, I put in this video. So they text us that they took a next step, and then I send them a link to this video. And I've used everything from YouTube, and there's actually something else called an LMS, a learning management software. You can actually make it a course. That's more advanced if you want to have quizzes and more advanced type of engagement, but maybe you just start with a YouTube video. But the idea is that you talk to them about the importance of coming to church, having a Bible study, and you do some very simple things, but have a video. Think about shooting something small, like 15 minutes, that's very simple. And then lastly, online groups. Having an online group kind of experience where people can move from a watcher into a community, and they can be heard and discussed, and using tools like Facebook Messenger or Zoom or Skype, where they can actually have an online group experience. And again, we're gonna have a whole webinar dedicated to this, and we're gonna go very deep on a very simple way that your church can launch an online group strategy. And so a couple next steps. Again, this is for beginners or advanced users. First off, I wanna challenge you to commit to streaming this weekend. Either if you've never streamed, or if you only streamed a couple times, consider, how do I kind of make my stream better? So maybe it's a better lighting, maybe it's a better audio, maybe you change locations, or maybe you need to consider using OBS this weekend. So start to learn. So commit to this weekend to make your stream better. So first time streamers, stream. If you've been streaming for a while, how can you make your quality of your stream better? And then I want you to let us know where you're going to be streaming. So go to the landing page that Nancy is going to talk about, and let us know how you're going to be streaming, and send us the URL. Our coaches want to know how you're going to be streaming so that we can provide feedback, and we want to learn together. So make sure you let us know where you're going to be streaming. So commit to streaming this weekend and making it better. Let us know where you're going to be streaming, And then we want to provide feedback in the coaching on how to make it better and also share those learnings with everybody together. We have tons of people watching right now, and we can all learn together. And then commit to engage in the 90-day coaching follow-up. And so this webinar is not, you were saying it at the beginning, this is not the end of the learning. We're going to have ongoing coaching to make your stream better and continue to answer your questions. I know we've just talked about a lot, but that's why the coaching's there. The coaching's there to help answer those questions and continue to go on, and then commit to attend the next webinar that's coming up. And so it's all about online small groups. So if this has been helpful, if you want to continue to build out a robust online strategy for your church, go to the next webinar. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Nati, who's going to explain some more things. And then we're going to go into Q&A.
Jay, thank you so much. Wasn't that packed with value? That was awesome. Thank you. And now you know why I said it's a unique webinar. And thank you, Jay. Really appreciate all the inputs. And now, before we go to the questions, we're going to answer questions. We've got a few questions, and lots of people are continuing to ask now that they've stopped listening. We're getting more questions, so we'll take up a few questions, but we'll make sure that all of your questions are answered, and we'll get back to you. And even if you're not able to answer it here, we will make sure you get the answers, right? But before that, I want to talk about those 2 points that Jay mentioned at the end, the 90-day free support program, where we will help you implement what you have learned. So I'm going to tell you how to do that. It's very simple 3 steps. So you're going to fill a form. I'll give you a link right now after this. So you can just go to that link, and it has a simple form. It takes less than 2 minutes. Believe me, I tried it. It's 9 one-line questions, like 1-word questions. So you just have to fill 1 or 2 words in each line. So it takes less than 2 minutes. And after you fill that form, you will be taken to a support page, a web page. You'll be a link for a web page. So that web page, you can just bookmark that page and use it every time you have a question. Because in that web page, you have the chat button and the email details. So you just basically, you go to that web page whenever you want to ask a question and ask. And once you ask, of course, we'll be in touch via email or by chat, and we can exchange. So any questions in the next 90 days, you can send it to us related to live stream, and also related to our next event. Okay, so next webinar, which I'll talk about in a minute, which is about groups, online communities. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up the QR code of the 90-day support. So all of you, pull out your phones. We all know the QR code, routine. Just point your phone at this QR code, and you will be taken to that page. If not, I think my friends are putting the link on the Zoom chat as well. So you can, if you're not able to pull out your phone, or if you are listening to this on your phone itself, you don't want to switch it off. So you can just click on the link or save the link. It's going to be on the chat. If not, I've also given the URL there. So I'm going to wait a couple of minutes for you to do this. So yeah, let us know if you've done it. If I see a few yes, and then we'll move forward. Yeah. If you're able to scan. Okay, lots of people are thanking Jay. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Jay. Just looking at the chat. That's awesome. Very helpful. Yeah, I'm just going to wait and leave the screen for a minute. Just for 1 minute.
Yes, it worked very easy. I just did it. Look at that.
There you go. Okay, yeah, lots of people are saying yes. So that's great. So that is the support page. If not, you have the link in the Zoom chat. So continue to do that. So this is something, it's a facility, it's free of cost. So I highly recommend you make use of it. And you also, it'll be good to go to MII resources page on the website. We've got lots of resources, and MII has specifically, I want to point out one resource called the white paper. It's called the India white paper. You will see it right at the top. It is a white paper on church and media ministry partnerships. So it has like practical things on how to partner, how churches and media ministries can partner for the kingdom. So very useful white paper. I highly recommend you go and check that out as well. Now, on the 30th of July, we are going to have at the same time, exactly 2 weeks from now, the third week from now, we are going to have the second webinar, and Jay is going to come back and give us more details about the online communities, small groups, and many other useful tips. I know that today most of us are blown away by all the practical tips and all the details that we heard from him, and he's going to continue to do that with that webinar as well. So mark your calendars, and to register for that, you have to go to the same link that you visited for registering for this, which is again this QR if you want to scan it. Even if for people who are watching it again, you can, this replay is going to be available in our support page, so you can go and scan it later as well. Okay, so that is all I wanted to do. And while this is on, I'm going to ask some questions to Jay. Jay, you ready?
Yep.
All right, so let's go to the questions. And so one of the, I've just collected a few of them, and I try to condense some of the questions and ask you in one single shot. So one of the main questions that we're getting is about the ideal length. I know you mentioned that we can have a couple of songs and then sermon and then move on. Is there like a good length? Is 30 minutes, 40 minutes? Because we are talking about online. It's not, just, I'm sorry, I have to start my video. So it's not just live service, which used to be an addition to the in-person service. Right now, in many places, we still under lockdown, especially in India, most of us are in lockdown. So this is the only way people are consuming. So what about the length, 30 minutes, 40 minutes? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think so. There's two things. First off is that you have to understand you are streaming your church service. So whatever church means in your context, like for your denomination, you don't want to make that less. So for example, for some churches, they have short church services, some have longer. I want it to feel like church for your community that you're reaching. So the priority is it for whatever's the minimal amount for it to feel like church. Don't make it 10 minutes or 15 minutes. It is church. The other thing is there's other ways for you to have short content. Like for example, you can take parts of your service if you wanted to. And this is what we do is so we actually stream our services and they're about an hour long. And then what we do is we take clips from that service. So we take like 3 to 4 clips from that service and we post that on social media in shorter formats. And so I would recommend that your online service should be a little shorter than a typical in-person service, but it doesn't need to be drastically shorter. I understand that some of the trends, people watch content shorter on the internet, but everything from, some videos on the internet, like stories are really short, like 30 seconds, where there's also long forms of content on the internet. Like, for example, here in the United States, I don't know how popular this is in India, but podcasts are very, very popular. And some of the most popular podcasts are 2 to 3 hours long. There's a podcast I listen to that his sometimes are 4 hours long. And so both long and short work, but I would think about whatever your typical worship service is, your church service, cut out 10 minutes. So cut out 10 to 15 minutes, make it a little bit shorter. That's probably what I would recommend. But you still want it to feel like church. So sometimes that it's not going to be short. It's going to be a little bit longer. And then if you want, you can experiment. You can experiment with it being a little shorter. And things tend to be shorter when they're online because you don't have an audience. That's like, as pastors and preachers, you tend to go longer when you have somebody there. But I would say a little bit shorter, but make it work for your context in your church.
Thank you. That was on point. The other question that's coming up a lot is about the YouTube and Facebook metrics that you mentioned. So the question is, if Facebook is going to just, have like 1%, and YouTube has longer, does it make sense for people to focus more on YouTube and their website? Do we still have to do Facebook? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so really good question. And what's important to understand with Facebook is just our digital world. And so you can reach so many people on Facebook. And so that's why the engagement, at least the retention is going to be smaller. So I don't want you to feel discouraged on the low retention because it's actually low because the reach is so much bigger. So it's the wrong way of looking at, for example, my church, The way I see Facebook, when we stream to Facebook, I would prefer Facebook over YouTube personally, because of the reach. Because if I want to reach people, Facebook is the best way, because there's two ways. It's where everybody is. The second is it's a really easy way to encourage your church members to share the service. So what I would actually say, if people feel comfortable, what we often do is after the service is done, we'll actually say, hey, if you just watched this, I would encourage you to share this with your friends on your Facebook, account, or in a private message. And so Facebook is the easiest platform to share things on. So yes, the engagement, the retention is going to be lower, but I don't think that should discourage you. And the other thing is, I see Facebook as a place where we go live there for exposure. It's a way to reach people. But I would start with Facebook. It's also easier to stream to Facebook, so it's the way to start. And then I would always add on YouTube. So that's what I would do as a start. Again, those things are going to change based off of who you're reaching. The other thing with YouTube, people tend to find things on YouTube because they're searching for things, for discoverability. So this is why there are two different platforms used for two different reasons. Both are really powerful platforms, but I would start with Facebook and then maybe add on YouTube later.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And we're getting lots of questions about the backup strategy. In other sense, what if my internet fails? What if I'm not able to move forward, or my camera fails, or something like that. So what would you suggest? I mean, should we have a second standby, or how many standbys do we have? What has been your experience? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So technically, Facebook and YouTube. I'm more familiar with Facebook, but Facebook does have a backup stream that you can actually set up. So for example, you can set up one stream, and then you can, if for whatever reason that stream doesn't work, you can have a default. So for example, your default could be you can upload a video and you can have a standby needed. Again, that takes obviously some technical skill to set some of those things up. But that's what we do. We actually stream live, and then we have a backup stream that is normally pre-recorded. Or what you do is that for whatever reason, your live stream fails. If you have that worst case scenario, and I want to let you know, every big company around the world, their website goes down eventually. So don't feel bad if something fails. Everybody has this problem. You just can't have it frequently. But what I would actually suggest as kind of a beginning step is that if you're advanced, figure out how to do the backup stream. If you're a beginner or kind of the beginning stages of this, actually, if the stream fails, try to start it back up again. If it doesn't work, then actually just upload your service afterwards and actually make it a post afterwards. And just let people know, people understand, people are very forgiving. Everybody has cellular issues. Everybody has internet issues. And again, and then what I would do is I would diagnose afterwards, why did that happen? How do we prevent that from happening? But check out the backup stream options. It's actually when you go live on Facebook, there in the producer side, there's ways to do it. If you're using OBS, what you can do is you can pre-record your service, and you can have your whole service as a media item. So if one of your cameras fails, you can actually, instead of going to the feed, you can go to the media item. But again, there's a bunch of ways to solve this. But the live backup feed is a great one on Facebook. You can just post something afterwards, or you can actually point to the media item and you can play that over the stream. So a bunch of different ways to solve this.
Fantastic. Thank you. Very helpful, very practical. One final question before we close for lack of time is about Zoom. So people want to know, what about Zoom meeting, Zoom, and using Zoom for live? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think Zoom for live streaming is a okay option. I do think Zoom's tools for streaming sometimes are not as they're not as smooth. They don't work as well. And I don't know, Nachi, what your experience has been in India particular, but in the US, sometimes the video quality is a lot less. So if you go live just from your phone or even from an external camera, you can have up to 1080p, where I believe Zoom actually limits the quality to 720, and it just, they do something, but they compress the video. Technically, they compress it. So sometimes it doesn't look as well. So I think it's a great option if you're going to do an interview. If somehow you're going to do maybe a co-teaching and you want to do an interview setting, but I don't think it's a great option long term. I don't know, Nachi, what it has the video quality. Is it sometimes not as well too when people use it in India?
Yeah, I mean, Zoom compared to Facebook or YouTube, specifically Facebook, the quality on Facebook is much, much better.
Yeah,
So that is one. And I would also add that Facebook and YouTube's social component is what makes it powerful and magical, which is not on Zoom. On Zoom, it's just captive audience. So
yeah, and typically, like for example, Zoom has a webinar feature, which we're using right now. What you can do is you can have panelists where maybe you have a cohort, maybe you want to have a conversation with a group of pastors. And then so you kind of have an inner core, and then you can go live to Facebook and YouTube directly through there. There's some things like that that make sense, but that usually only makes sense for conferences. I don't think it really makes sense, or webinars for like church service. I would just go live directly to those platforms personally.
I agree. Well, thank you so much. Actually, I have one more question. I think we should touch on this. By the way, before we go there, I just want to say thank you all for many, many questions that have come in. We want to be very respectful of your time because it's late in the night here. It's 9:15, and we understand that you all have to move on. So we will make sure we answer as many questions as possible. And there will be an FAQ section. There will be a chat section. I highly encourage that all of you take advantage of this 90-day support. So before I ask the last question, I just want to mention that all your questions will be answered. Now, the final question I really want to touch on is how to get more people to attend our live stream. Like, how do we even encourage people to do that? How do you encourage people to share it? Do you have any tips? How do you do it in your church?
Yes, really good question. So a couple things. I think the quality of your service is important. So you want something that's worth sharing. So maybe the first couple of weeks, you shouldn't promote it heavily. You should just get comfortable with doing it, because you only have a few times to promote it until people just know what it is. So get down your streaming and make sure it works well, and that it looks good, sounds good, all those things. And then maybe into the third, fourth week, you're ready to promote. So I think that there are two primary ways to promote it. One is to have a very clear strategy to tell your members to share it. Lean into personal evangelism. So, and give them a vision. Say, hey, we are streaming on Facebook or on YouTube. We want you to share this with your friends. So share it by hitting the share button. You can even do a quick video of like, hit this button and share it. In two ways. They could share it with everybody. They can also share it directly with people. I actually typically tend to say at the end of our services, pick one person that needed to hear this message and text it to them or send it to them in their DMs. Most people don't want to sit on the corner of a street and tell everybody about your church service. But they're willing to share it with their family member or an individual person privately. So we do a lot of strategy on teaching our people how to evangelize with our digital tools by sharing it. The second option is through ads and actually promoting it with people. Now, I want to remind you, you do not jump. I think you first need to get used to streaming your service. Then you need to rely off of evangelism of your members of your church. And then as that's working and you see fruit from that, then you can start to experiment with ads, and you can very affordably promote it. Now, we spend fractions of kind of what we can spend on ads, but by experimenting with just $3 here, $5 there on promoting it, it can be very powerful. And we could talk more in the coaching, answer more of this, but we actually target people very specifically. So we don't just boost the post. I actually target people that live in Facebook. You can target people in certain locations. You can target certain ages, certain genders. We actually use something I use a lot called a lookalike audience, where I actually can target people that look like certain other people. And and so I would recommend, don't just boost the post. Think very thoughtfully about who you're going to target. But we rely a lot off of personal evangelism as a start. And then a couple times a year, we use Facebook ads. You'll find you can rally a lot of exposure by just rallying your members of your church to share it.
Thanks so much, Jay. Really appreciate all the incredible insights. So I just want us to pray and close this day. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And I just want to especially thank Jay on behalf of everyone in this great country, all our church leaders that have attended. You have been a blessing to us, Jay. We thank you for your time. We appreciate your time. We pray that every minute you've spent with us and shared your wisdom will be given back to you, pressed down, shaken together, running over. Your seeds will produce a great harvest for you and for your family. Thank you, Jay. We appreciate you. That's what you're seeing on the chats. People are like just so blessed. Thank you so much. Let's look to God and thank God as well as we close in prayer. Heavenly Father, we come to you in Jesus' name. We love you. We thank you and praise you, Lord. We thank you because you have brought us today, and you brought every single person in this webinar, and you especially prepared Jay for a time as this to share these incredible practical insights that's going to help many, many people who heard this. All the church leaders, all the men and women of God who heard this are going to go back and implement it. I especially pray a blessing upon them. I speak a blessing upon Jay, that his time that he spent here will be multiplied and given back to him in every single way, Father. I pray that even as people start to implement things, you will be with them. Whoever is signed up for the 90-day, we'll be able to help them as much as we can. And whoever was not able to sign up, even as they implement by themselves, you will give them wisdom. We ask you to be with them and walk with them as they do this, so that the digital and the social media space will be filled with your word, and people will know you, and there will be light in the midst of darkness. We thank you, Father, because there are people out there who need help, who need to be served, who need to hear about you and what you can do to help them. So we pray that you will use this mightily for your glory, and may this nation be blessed because of what we heard here, Lord. We love you, Jesus. We look forward to all that you'll do in the days to come. We bless MII. We bless David Penway. We bless the whole team. And thank you for all that you're doing in and through MII. In Jesus' awesome name we pray. Amen. Thank you once again, Jay. Thanks, everyone. Do check out MII.global, and we'll see you on 30th of July for the next webinar. Do sign up with the same link. God bless you. Bye-bye.